Hi guys, welcome to Rethink by Human Inc. Today I'm super excited to have Azran from Naluri join us. Thank you so much Azran for joining and being willing to kind of share with our viewers here. We have kind of changed the game a bit since the last session with Rohit. Today we're going to basically pick some questions from the fishbowl, and I'd like to invite you to pick the first one here.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, they're even branded the same color as the Naluri brand. So
fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for having me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just jump right in.
Yeah, exactly.
What your fishbowl...
Oh, so I'm getting the question. That was clever. Right. So maybe I'll ask you.
All right, okay.
So what would be 3 adjectives that you would use to describe your business, Naluri?
Wow, only 3.
Yeah.
I think number 1, we're results oriented.
Yeah.
Because we really want to take a quantitative approach to health.
Yeah.
I think also, I'm going to say radical.
Yeah.
Because we have to challenge a lot of the conventions and status quo.
Yeah.
But I think third also, if I'm going to go down with this R theme, is to be respectful.
Yeah.
To be collaborative, to listen and to care.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that might be missing in a very technical sphere.
That's awesome. So maybe if you could give an example from one of the 3, something that kind of that you've done,
right,
that's kind of linking with that kind of adjective or value.
So I mean, we can have a very long conversation about what are the structural problems with healthcare today.
Yeah.
But one of them is that it tends to be based on activities rather than results.
Yeah.
Right? And so you get paid per consultation, per treatment, per prescription,
yeah,
but not whether you actually get healthy or not. Right?
Yeah.
And so if we're going to reimagine healthcare, we need to, one of the pillars I believe is to have a quantitative results-based model.
Yeah.
Right? So in our case, for example, because we work at the intersection between chronic diseases like diabetes and heart diseases and cancer, but mental health.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, and stress, and there's this big overlap.
Yeah.
So how do you quantify depression, anxiety, and stress?
Yeah.
And then how do you quantify the markers of diabetes, like your blood sugar, heart disease, like your blood pressure and your cholesterol, and cancer? And then know if that's your starting point, how much of an improvement can you deliver in 4 months, in 12 months? So that the people who are paying for healthcare says, okay, now I get it, right? This is a tangible quantitative value.
Yeah. So it's in a way redefining what being results-oriented means, and redefining the industry and figuring out the technologies to drive that, the ways of working.
Absolutely.
But it's really asking the question of what's the end state, what's the impact you want to create, what's the impact you can promise, for which cost. And I guess we see similar things in our industry where there's a lot of like training activities, but not enough clarity on why. What, by when, how much, you know.
Exactly.
So being much more, I guess, business oriented, and maybe the healthcare space is a good example of this kind of the caring and all that, which is great, but what's the result and how much does it cost to produce it?
That's right.
Yeah. Maybe we can pick another one from the bowl. I'll try to pick one for you this time. So let's see here.
Okay.
So I'll pass it to you.
Okay, great. So it says, what do you look forward to in today's session in 3 words? I'm sensing there's a theme here of 3 words. Okay. So 3 words for me would be curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Because I think we should all challenge each other.
I love it.
I'm hoping to learn from it.
Yeah.
But also, I think the last C for me would be connection.
Yes. Thank you.
Because how do we build bonds as a result of this?
Connection coming out of this. So thanks for that. So first and foremost, you were game to be curious to join. So I love that. I think for me, it's fairly similar. I would say I'm curious about well, in 3 words, it's tough. I guess I'm curious about similarities between what you're doing with Naluri for mental health and physical health and well-being. And what we're doing with corporate innovation and humanizing work. I'm also curious about differences, because what can we learn from each other, or how can these ideas, not just as companies and exploring partnership, but more from like how can different approaches inspire, because we so need new approaches in 2020. And I think, so curious is probably the key word for all of them. But similarities, differences, and then I think there's something around kind of how you're doing it as a leader, the entrepreneurial journey a bit. So those will probably be the 3
Okay, look
key
forward
words
to
for
jumping
me.
in.
Yeah. So maybe you want to pick another one, then we see what comes.
What this is about.
You can either answer it yourself or you can ask me, up to you.
Okay, so it says, this is a challenge that I'm supposed to describe what I do, my business, in less than 6 words.
Ouch.
This is like real design thinking constriction. So I think what we do is we help people achieve their healthiest and best selves.
Wow, that was very, very good. Achieve their healthiest and best selves. I'm curious to say, maybe with another 6 words around best selves. What's that about? Yeah.
Well, because
healthiest, I think I get.
Yeah. So to us, right, one of the other we talked about the first challenge of healthcare being activity-based rather than results-based. The other challenge of healthcare is that it's very siloed. By specialization. Right? So you see a cardiologist, she's only going to talk to you about your heart. You see a gastroenterologist, it's about your gut.
It's not really holistic, right?
But health, as you know, is incredibly holistic and integrated, right? And so we can't just look at health just from a physical health point of view, or even just an emotional or mental health point of view, but there are other aspects to it, right? Like how does that lead to your performance at work? How does it help you become more financially stable and healthy? Because these are important considerations for your level of stress and resilience and mental health, right? And so you've got to look at health much bigger than just the physical or even the mental dimensions. So that's why we use best as a way of broadening the definition of health, so that you really, it's about human performance. To try to connect between what you do and what I do.
Connection already.
Yes.
I love that.
Right.
I guess for me, probably if I were to attempt the 6 words, it's a small budget, but I guess that's 2020. I would say it's about humanizing business. Would be the first 2, and then the kind of explainer of those 2 would be better work environments or better places to work, leading to better customer experience and value, right?
Fantastic.
Because I think a lot of like CEOs and boards want to drive growth, how can we innovate, disrupt and all that. And they kind of always think of like new product, but they're not really seeing that they need to rethink how they organize their organization, how they work with people, how their people feel. Back to a connection again here. And we always kind of deprioritize these questions. We can get well-being later in life. We can get meaning later in life. Let's first make some money, then maybe we can upgrade the employee program, or that we can't afford it this year.
That's right.
Mental health sounds expensive. Let's wait. Actually, we need to slow down to speed up.
That's right.
But most senior leaders didn't get to where they are by slowing down, right? And they often actually came there at a high individual human cost, but also very high team cost. What's the graveyard behind all their financial results? What's actually the human story behind that? And if we calculated the financial cost of that suffering and build it in, we would see a different story, I think. Just like people are saying in sustainability, that companies should pay tax for the water they use, or the air that they pollute, or the petrol that they burn, right? Carbon credits, whatever, right? Maybe there's also a human carbon credit, that we need to start figuring in. So in terms of this idea of being results-oriented, going into the space around physical well-being, but also emotional, psychological well-being, could you explain a little bit more in layman terms, what does the Naluri actually do?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the human part of Naluri. Because Naluri is having your own professional team guide you through a health journey to get you healthier. Because while we talked about results orientation and we talked about how health needs to be holistic rather than siloed and specialized, the other third part, especially when it comes to conditions like these chronic diseases or mental health, is these are things you can't fix with a single prescription or consultation or treatment. It needs structured ongoing help. But actually healthcare is designed as very episodic, right? Like per consultation, per treatment. And if you then try to go through this journey yourself, what science shows is less than 20% of people are able to manage their health by themselves. So we can increase that success rate to at least 60% by giving you your own professional team to guide you. So imagine having your own psychologist at your beck and call through your mobile phone, your own dietitian, your own fitness coach, your own pharmacist, your own doctors, and your own executive coaches and financial planners, because these are 2 very important parts of that holistic part of health. And they're all kind of really focused on your health and well-being and where you are at the starting point and what do you need to do over, say, a 3, 4, or even 6-month journey. But now, how do you do that at an affordable and accessible way? Because clearly, you know, if a single session with a psychologist is 250 ringgit, right? That's not going to be accessible to many people.
No.
On top of that, there's another access challenge, which is in the entire country, Malaysia, we only have about 220 practicing clinical psychologists. We only have about 400 plus practicing psychiatrists.
Yeah.
In states like Sarawak, there's like 2. And that is why if you want to go to a public hospital system, your wait list can be 9 months.
Yeah.
How do you get healthy, right? If every therapy session is 9 months apart.
Yeah.
Or you go to a private hospital and you're going to pay 400 ringgit per hour. So there's clearly a disconnect, right? And so what we want to do is, how do I use technology to bring the human professional part, but do it at scale and at a much lower rate? Because what we don't believe in, which some people do, is, oh, AI chatbots can do that, right? But we know when it comes to health, the most important part is this human empathetic connection. We call it a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
You need someone that trusts. You've got my back. You're there when I'm stuck, right? And so you can't replace this human element.
So it's actually, the service is actually provided as calls with real human beings. It's not a AI.
It's not an AI chatbot. We use a
okay.
lot of AI
Yeah.
on the back end to help the professional team be able to manage 10 times the number of people that they would have if it's through a face-to-face conversation. So if it was a call or a video session, which is what telemedicine is trying to do, right? So telemedicine, to me, healthcare 1.0 is you go to a hospital clinic, a physical premise, and healthcare 2.0 is, oh, we now have telemedicine where I can book a session. But that still has limitations because when I'm talking to you, I can't talk to anyone else. So I'm limited
it's only the
by
travel
my capacity.
cost that's the saving,
exactly,
really,
right?
and location.
So the healthcare 3.0 that we want to redefine is to say, well, let's challenge that assumption that it needs to be a live conversation. Let's move it to an asynchronous conversation, like a WhatsApp thread, right? Where you can have multiple conversations on text. And that by itself already unlocks quite a bit of productivity. But if it was just that, then you don't need another app, you can just use WhatsApp. But very quickly you realize the limitation of WhatsApp is that as a psychologist or a doctor, I've got to explain a lot of things to you. I've got to wait for you to respond. I've got to ask a lot of questions to you. I've got to wait for you to respond, right? So now we start to create various digital tools so that as a coach, for example, at the start of the conversation, we want to explore the stress triggers in your life. I can say, hey, Chris, when you got 5 minutes down later, why don't you do module number 4 on understanding your stress triggers? So now you're doing that on your own time. That frees up my time, right? And so you're now learning a little bit about stress, answering some questions, and then I, as a psychologist, can then look at your answers when you're done and come back and carry on that thread conversation in a more focused manner because now I know a lot of your information. But now you can then say, hey, if 10,000 people are answering that same question, I actually have now a powerful data set that's very structured. That can then give me, the psychologist, insights that says, well, based on Chris's response, he is this, this, and that, right? And you can very quickly now see, as a psychologist, that allows me to get up to speed very quickly. And this allows me to, for example, if we only did telemedicine Zoom calls, I would be maxed out at 50 clients a month. But our psychologists now are pushing 600.
Wow.
Right? And so if we 10x the productivity of a professional coach, we can make it 10 times cheaper. And I think 10 times cheaper is when you start to unlock a lot of accessibility.
A lot of exciting things, This is very interesting because it's, if I almost like take it, one thing is the space you're doing this in, but you could almost take the same methodology or way of thinking about how to redefine and make value accessible to more people at a more lower cost, more affordable. But there's also, in order to do that, how do you redesign the experience of the people providing that value? Because not everything can be automated.
That's right.
So what is it that can be? What is it that can't be?
That's right.
And how do you enable decisions, insights, relevance, connection?
That's right.
Using technology to make us more human together, not less human. Where I think a lot of people have experienced the kind of 2.0 things, where actually it might have become cheaper for my bank to deal with me, it might have become cheaper for my telco to serve me or my government, but it feels worse than it did before, not better always, right?
That's right.
Or as bad.
Right. So the good example is, how AI is transforming the field of radiology. So before, a radiologist would study for years and years to be a specialist, to look at x-rays and CT scans and say, oh, I think there's a hairline fracture there, or early cancer tumors. But we all know now that AI can analyze, millions of images and be able to be much more precise than the radiologist. So the radiologist can never outcompete the computer in terms of what is wrong with you. But the job of the radiologist is not redundant. The radiologist now is focused on, okay, if I understand that, how do I present it to you in a way that is empathetic, in a way that makes sense, in a way that you can then understand, okay, what's next from it, right? And so that's why jobs will change. It's not necessarily going to be made redundant, but you move away from the analysis part that you say we can automate to the human connection part, because that is the part that AI can never replace.
Yeah, exactly. No, let's take another question to see what we have here. I'll try to take one here. So it says here, share one unexpected, surprising business leadership learning from 2020.
Wow.
I guess if I were to try first,
okay, go for it.
There's been many.
Yeah.
I think one thing that surprised me was we've been doing a lot of this work, obviously offline, working with clients in labs, in workshop spaces, co-working spaces, all kinds of spaces, to really look at these questions around change, new products, new customer experience, or to build in the skills in their organizations to do that. And a lot of learning and development folks were like, well, it has to be offline, it can't be online, right? So there was a lot of pushback initially when we said, well, we can do it for you online, and you will actually save cost on hotel, you'll save cost on food, you'll save cost on travel. Folks who are in other states don't need to disturb their family and travel down and fly and whatever. So initially there was a lot of pushback against this, and people saying, well, after the MCO, we'll just wait till after the MCO. But then as the MCO kept extending, they're like, well, how long can we actually wait to get these results done, right? And is there even going to be an after, as we thought of it initially? And then we said, well, maybe we just try. Maybe we just try, right? And if we don't like it, then we can come back in person after, What happened was actually that most of the clients that experienced online learning or online consulting were like, well, this is actually as good or better. And even when they were allowed to do it offline, they're like, well, actually, we just want to do it this way, because they started seeing these cost savings. So it's interesting how fairly conservative learning and development folks and organizations who had been doing something the same way for so long, through this crisis, kind of opened their eyes to, well, we have to experiment. And actually the experiments went so well that they said, well, actually it changes how we think about learning, how we think about creating change. Even because a lot of consultants said, well, you can download learning online, that's one thing. But getting groups to discover together higher order thinking kind of stuff, more collaborative stuff, that you have to do in classroom, clearly. But we've actually found that when you use combination of Mural, being able to map a whiteboard virtually and co-create in teams dialing in from across the region, when you bring in the emotional connection to have the psychological safety, to have those, what is tough in the C-suite right now, what's difficult for our sales team, how's HR struggling and all that. You can have just as good or even better sometimes conversations, and so that's been one thing that has kind of moved even my own thinking, because I think I was limited by my own experience of not having had clients be open to that, and therefore we hadn't done so much of the more complex stuff, but also kind of having seen them move allowed us to move. So that's one thing that really excites me now, is because that also then opens up, well, then you're not just limited to, even if you can't fly out of Malaysia, we can actually very well work with the whole of APAC or anywhere pretty much. Of course, time zone still matters in a sense, but yeah.
Wow.
So that's been one shift that kind of impacted our business. How about for you, maybe?
Well, a lot, but I think if I were to focus on the leadership part, clearly 2020 has been a year of extreme uncertainty. But I think what I've learned is the more uncertain things are, the more we as leaders have to communicate.
Yes.
And that's a challenge, because sometimes you feel like I need to be the one with the answers. And you put a lot of pressure on yourself to come up with the answers. Right? And if you don't have the answers, I'm not ready to share with my team members. Right? But I think for us, it is the more you don't know, the more you need to over communicate, and the more you actually need to communicate that you don't know.
And be vulnerable in a sense.
Exactly. Right. And so I think, for example, in our case, how do we move from just quick daily stand-ups to twice daily, where we now have morning check-ins 9 to 9:15 and evening check-outs at 5:45 to 6, because the cadence of communication is important, even though you have no idea what's going to happen next week, but more touch points. But also in our case also we said, look, because we don't know, we need to be prepared that this thing is going to take a long time. Right? And one thing, as much as we help other people avoid stress and burnout, we have to make sure we don't fall into that same trap and burn ourselves up. And that is why that 5:45 to 6 checkout is important, because we then make an explicit decision. What work is it so urgent that has to continue after 6? Right? Now, sometimes there must be, right? Because you've got proposals, you've got deadlines and all that. But if it's every night, then something is wrong. Right? And you know the effectiveness of your team members will start to deteriorate rapidly. So you make very conscious decisions about, okay, 1 or 2 things a week, but after that, 6 o'clock, guys, laptops down.
So I love that. So there's this sense of as uncertainty increases, the pressure on us as leaders to communicate or to have the answer is increasing. And with the old leadership model that many of our clients are still kind of believing in, practicing, or starting to realize isn't working, but maybe not really having the right idea or of confidence or feeling comfortable, I guess, with not knowing, right? And saying, well, actually, here's the update. I don't have a clue what we're gonna do, or this is what's happening, but I need your help to figure it out, right? I think a lot of, especially CEOs, are very uncomfortable with that, and generally in the C-suite, right? I'm hired as an expert to know my domain, right? But who could have possibly have read up on 2020?
That's right. That's right.
Maybe go for another one. You want to pick one?
Sure. I'll try one. Okay. Whew. It says, what are some key mindsets for entrepreneurs and leaders to thrive in an environment full of surprises like today? Well, I'm biased because this has been the single question that I was trying to answer when I tried to reflect on the last 20 plus years of my career, my journey. And so I wrote a book about it, and I tried to distill it into 2 things. The book is called 30 Days and 30 Years, and it's a metaphor for curiosity and purposefulness. Because the world that we live in today is changing so rapidly. And of course, for me, I like to be the one that's creating or instigating that change rather than waiting for it to happen to me. That the idea of planning in 12-month horizons is obsolete, right? But yet that's what people do. Annual plans, annual budgets, annual performance appraisals. Instead, what used to be done in 12 months, we now have to figure out what to do in 30 days, right? Much shorter sprints. In fact, mostly even 7-day cycles. But if you're only doing sprints, you can run the risk of running around in circles, right? And so you need a clear sense of direction, that North Star, that compass. And so 30 years for me became the other planning horizon, the other extreme, where you say, okay, imagine 30 years, because what's cool about 30 years is you no longer worry about budget constraints or technology limitations, regulatory barriers.
It's kind of freeing you up.
Right? And say, how will you really change people's lives meaningfully if you had 30 years to do it? And if you could distill down like the essence of what is it that you're really trying, that gives you the compass. So that as you make these quick iterations over 7 days or 30 days, you course correct based on that compass, right? And so therefore, for me, the mindset, of course, we talked a lot about the curiosity mindset, right? The ability to learn quickly and challenge your existing assumptions. But the other part for me is the purposefulness. Why are you
curious in the first place?
Why are you curious in the first place? So that for me is my 2 anchors.
I love that because it's linking long-term thinking and the big why with the short-term why. And so what are we doing about it? What's the immediate one thing I can do to get started to move from paralysis analysis, kind of over-talking, over-planning, overthinking, which many large organizations are caught up in, and even individuals, especially as the novelty and uncertainty is increased. We think we need, I need more time to plan now, but that's what you really can't afford and really don't have, right?
In the last 2.5 years, we've even picked or identified 6 cases of suicide ideation.
Human Inc.